you spend too much time on Twitter or X, you could fall into a place of believing that all the software engineering jobs are going to be gone. Is SaaS dead? Is that real? There's a lot of people out there saying the world's going to radically change. And that could be good, or it could be bad, or it could just be different. It's not just an upskill. It's more of a renewing of your mind. It's thinking differently.
Somebody said, you don't know what's going in your code. You don't know the low-level information that's happening there. The executive said, so what? I never did. Why is it different now with AI writing it? I don't care about the low-level details anymore. I care more about the acceptance tests. I care more about the end-to-end tests. I care more about the artifacts that are coming out of a system like that.
You take me and have me look at some of my code I wrote, even when I was getting started. I don't remember that code, but I can deeply understand that code, and I can consistently iterate and improve that code, no matter how good or bad it was back in the day. If it gets dumb again, I'm back there doing the code by hand, which I'm not afraid of yet.
All right. We're back again for another episode of Tech Council, and back by popular demand. Jason McMunn is joining us to talk about some trends with AI and how do we best leverage our people and help them with the transition. So really excited. Thanks for coming back, man. It's good to see you again.
I'm excited to be here. I had a lot of fun last time I had to come back.
If he's asking for more punishment or we're asking for more punishment, I can't tell which one it is.
Yeah, for sure.
We're all in it together.
So kick us off. We wanted to talk about upskilling in enterprise environments. It's been something we've been dealing with, especially in technology. It's basically been a constant thing since my career started, so 20 years or so. What can we learn from the last 20 years of these trends as we enter probably one of the biggest upskilling necessities that's ever happened, or that's going to happen very, very fast? So
I think it's all related to the rate of change, right? When you look at the rate of change in technology, a lot of the stuff didn't change very fast through the 80s and 90s. And then as we started coming into it in the 90s and the early aughts, the rate of change is changing even faster. So it's not the speed that's changing, it's the velocity that's changing, and you're going faster. The impact on that is people that could handle a certain amount of change at a certain rate are starting to feel a little bit overwhelmed. That's limiting their capability of handling even more change. And so it's a bit overwhelming is what I'm seeing. And I think you're right, with AI coming, it's going to be even more of a differentiator because even the bosses don't know how to use it. For a long time, I think the tech bosses knew what they wanted. And they're like, yeah, I want to get that. But even now, I think a lot of the tech bosses are like, I want the right thing that's going to do for me. But I can't even give you an exact blueprint for it because it's changing every day.
Well, there's fear on the AI stuff that I've never observed before, right? Like there's always the odd, you go to cloud, there's always the odd systems administrator that might be a little threatened by that.
I think cloud was the first one, right? Web came, and I think people didn't understand web. And I came into my career just as the web was taking off. Started college in the early 90s. I entered the job market when the web was just hitting. And so for me, it wasn't that the web was everything I'd ever known, but I'd never known any of the large client server systems. I just didn't know any of those. I didn't learn about those in school. I learned about how to program in C and how to program in different languages.
Every time there was a change, programming originally was punch cards, right? You had to punch a card and you had to run it through. It was a very, very slow system. And then as that evolved, it goes into more of a compiled or semi-compiled or a different way of programming a machine. And every time you go one layer up, you go from there, skip a few steps, and I'm sure
TUIs.
You finally get to somewhere where Duncan can actually write code that you're at a good level of abstraction.
You look at assembly code, for example, and you look at machine code. There was a layer above that, which is a more of a traditional language. You see Sharp or Fortran. That translates one level below it. You go from one level up. And so every time you do that, not only is the speed from getting from punch cards to Fortran, that's shortening, but we're in the same type of system where now all those languages that we've been working with for years and years that are compiled, well, we've got a system that is writing it for us, but it's not that dissimilar from Fortran to punch cards, but we're just now living through it. But then there's one layer that we're not thinking of is that it's a non-deterministic approach to things. If you compile a program, you compile your Golang, your Go to a binary, you're going to get the same binary every single time. There's no distinction there. But now we're going from that to a non-deterministic approach. You could prompt the same exact machine twice, and you're going to get a different result.
And I think that's the fun, right? I think that's part of why the people that are against it are saying, you can't trust it because 100 times I do it. But guess what? You can't trust Portworx storage either. We figured out over time that that sometimes
I think that's why they're so scared of AI is that you might get something that is unexpected. You might get something that is a slight deviation from your standards. At that point, it's a critical error or it's a critical miss because there's very slight difference.
Claude Code is my daily driver. For 3 months, I was like, you've done it wrong. Something went haywire. And they even they got on there and did a little bit of fact finding with it. And they said what happened is they kind of regenerate Claude code from prompts over and over and over. And something just got a little off track with their prompts. And for 3 months, Claude code, the model was still good, but the system prompt and all that, the stuff they don't let you see, that went haywire. And I actually gave up on it. I suspended my subscription and I was like, I'm going to go make Codex work. And it's not that Codex isn't great. It is great. Like it's 100% great. My point is they're all pretty good. Yeah.
I use all three constantly.
That's the thing where, to the point of the conversation today, is the upskilling is that you need people who can roll with those punches and be able to identify that something is wrong. This isn't the right implementation. It's not the right solution. I can't trust this right now. I need to step back versus somebody who maybe doesn't know enough about how to use these tools, has the wrong prompt, wrong inputs. For a while, people were just going and asking the machine to make a change, and you're not asking for it to get it to be an expert on your system.
And some people were trying to stomp the chump, right? Like some people were trying to get to be racist. Some people were trying to get to be bad and all that. But I think that leads into the fear factor and the trust factor. You either fundamentally think that the executive leadership is out to help you, enable you, and make you successful, and that everything they're doing is for you to make them more successful in that bidirectional commitment. Or you're thinking, they're just looking for an excuse to get rid of me. And if you feel like that they're going to use AI to get rid of you, that's not the right place to work anyhow. You might feel trapped there and you might feel like this is where I have to be right now because of my circumstances. But that is then I think what doubles down on the fear and the fear response. It's that they don't have trust with leadership.
I would take that a step further though. I fully agree with what you're saying, but like you spend too much time on Twitter or X or whatever, you could fall into a place of believing that all the software companies are going to be gone, all the software engineering jobs are going to be gone. Like whether that has any real validity or not, it's out there, right? And actually that narrative is repeated often enough, of course, usually by people who are raising money and things like that. And so you always have to remember that. I know all of that. I understand all of that. I understand those dynamics. And I still have moments where I'm like, man, is SaaS dead? Is that real? Like maybe we're wasting our time building a SaaS product. What are we doing? Of course I shake it off, but it's hard for people to get inundated with that stuff. There's a lot of people out there saying, the world's going to radically change, and that could be good or it could be bad or it could just be different, right? That landscape is something we have to take into account. The average white-collar worker at a financial institution or some other large corporation, they're getting that stuff from their podcasts, from their TV shows, from their water cooler talk type of thing. That kind of fear-mongering narrative's out there. And like that, to me, is one of the things that makes it so much more intense. We have to take all the learning from, whether it was going to DevOps and cloud and all those different things, and all the sort of change management, upskilling that we've learned over the last few decades, and really become much better at it than we were for those transitions in order to help people. It's not just an upskill, it's more of a renewing of your mind.
It's Carol Dweck. It's the Carol Dweck Fixed Mindset book, right? The Carol Dweck book is more relevant now. The Fixed Mindset versus Growth Mindset book is more relevant than ever now. Like it now literally is the top thing.
Your job is to create value, to ship value.
Exactly.
It's not to write code. Right? The code is how you ship value. But the point is, if you can think about it in the abstracted, like you're trying to create value for someone else, there's a transaction there. It's not bad it's not a transactional in a bad way. There's a transaction there where they're paying you to create value. The cool thing about this situation in this moment in time is, as Jason was saying, like you have the opportunity to go up another level of abstraction, which means you gain more and more leverage. My dad was at University of Michigan in the 60s doing punch cards. You hear the stories about how long that took to do and like the nightmare of
dropping a stack.
We worked in the 1960s programming in 5 minutes, if not 30 seconds. So you think about the leverage that I have compared to him as a programmer 50, 60 years ago. Think about that. Now we may have that level of step function coming to us, right? And we see it with ourselves. Like we're all talking about which tools we use and what we can bounce in and out of. And also now the skill is different. I've got friends and guys that I've worked with that would sit down with their mechanical keyboards and just write the most beautiful stuff. And they wouldn't have to backspace every 3 characters like I do and like all those different things. But that skill's like, who cares, right? Like, it doesn't matter anymore.
I saw a good example of this a while back, and it still sticks with me. This is a 2-part thing, but somebody said, you don't know what's going in your code. You don't know the low-level information that's happening there. The executive said, so what? I never did. Why is that different now with AI writing it?
They didn't know what tail recursion was anyhow, so who cares if you wrote elegant tail recursion? They didn't know.
But that's shifted a little bit, though, where that mid-level or senior developer, they don't know everything about the app anymore. And I found a lot of success with is I don't care about the low-level details anymore. I care enough because I have to at least make sure things are working of performance, but I care more about the acceptance tests. I care more about the end-to-end tests. I care more about the artifacts that are coming out of a system like that, because it's faster for me to say, here's what success looks like. Let the bots figure that out. I put some very strict, strong guardrails in the code itself so that it can then iterate over and over again and say, well, I ran linting. I have all these errors. I'm going to fix those. Oh, I got to simplify this function. I've got to reduce the size of this function. I've got to reduce the size of this file. There's a cognitive complexity of 50, but you want 40. So I'm going to refactor that, have it cleaner. Those strict guardrails lets the bot go into recursion and fixing. So the point I'm trying to make here is that you don't have to care about the low level details anymore. And that's where I think some people are getting uncomfortable with it. But in reality, there's a certain person in your organization that already didn't know those details. They trusted you to do that. But now that's shifted to you, and there's a discomfort with you not knowing, and you're used to knowing. But
well, they're afraid they're going to be cut out. Like, well, what if there's nobody that needs to worry about it, what am I doing here, right? And so, like, that's why you got to go up.
What would you say you do here?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and another part of it is, like, when you talked about the consistency, you take me and have me look at some of my code I wrote, even when I was getting started. I don't remember that code, but I can deeply understand that code, and I can consistently iterate and improve that code, no matter how good or bad it was back in the day. Part of me still wonders if somebody says, change this functionality, and I go to Claude Code, if it gets dumb again, what happens next? Then I'm back there to like doing the code by hand, which I'm not afraid of yet.
I'll tell you, I tried to write a SQL statement earlier today, and I tried to do it. I tried to like kind of raw dog it. I was like, oh man, I don't know how to write SQL anymore. Like, I've completely lost the ability.
But that used to be a whole job, right? Like, that used to be a whole job. SQL.
It was.
SQL operators would like optimize SQL. Yeah.
They would write your code for you. We've gone through that quite a bit here. Hey, we're growing. We've got a lot more data coming in, and we're using Postgres as our database, but I've never done DB admin. I've never done a thing where I'd have to look at the complexity of joins and indexes, and we've got this sequential scan versus some of the other scans that are happening. It's a partial index scan with a heap lookup or a hash lookup, something like that. I've never done that before.
Jason and I have a lot more appreciation for DBAs than we did 6 months ago. There's no question
the point
about
is,
that.
I would never be able to do that before. It would take me year to look at it. But then I was 100%. Able to, within a couple days, I have a script I can run that runs the full analysis of my database, gives me all the missing indexes or the unused indexes. And now, within a week of real work on this, I could triage our database and say, oh yeah, this query is why it's slow.
But you also knew what to ask for, right? And that's one of the things I'll talk about, the old guy factor. I taught at UNLV for a couple semesters, and I made a deal because I was new to teaching. I had not taught before, and I could not get a curriculum from the university, so I had to make my own curriculum. And I told the class, I was like, I'm going to give you these assignments. They might be too hard. So if there's any assignment that you think's too hard, and you got 2 weeks to do them, I'll do it in one class period, an hour and a half. And if I can't do it in an hour and a half, I'll say it was too hard and I'll throw it out. And it was like the third one, young woman's like, hey, that one's too hard. And I was like, all right. And so I was like, do you want me to do it in like Windows with Visual Code, or do you want me to do it with like Emacs or Linux or something like that? Because I had a dual boot laptop, and they're like Linux. So I just open up VI and I start cranking on this thing. And it was like maybe 1,100 line program. And I'm just writing. And I'm talking while I'm doing it about how I'm doing it. And I go through the whole thing and then I like read it all. And they're like, what are you looking for? I'm like, I'm looking for syntax errors. So this was like 2003. They literally had the syntax highlighters, the syntax checkers and all that I didn't have when I was learning. And I used to have to wait for a compile, like not punch cards, but I still had to like wait for compile, go get coffee if it was a big system. So like I learned not to make semicolon mistakes and things like that. Like, you know, my mom could type flawlessly because she learned how to type on a mechanical typewriter, and she worked for a law firm where if you made a mistake, you had to like start over. No whiteout. You had to start over. So like these things, there were like these crucibles that made you like hard. A boy named Sue, like you got to get tough. A lot of those things are missing. So like to some degree, having gone through some number of those hard things, like the vibe coders today are like going to Lovable or Replit, and they're like, make me an app that does the thing. They don't even know that databases exist, right? So to some degree, you still know what to ask for because of your experiences in the past. And I think that's still valuable. So I think we just need to get those people in the roles to understand we're not replacing you, but we're not going to make you dig with a shovel. We're going to give you a backhoe. Backhoes are dangerous though. Like, you know, I think we talked about this in the other podcast. You could literally like break something with a backhoe, but like also you can dig a lot faster. So it's like not about replacing you. It's about giving you power tools.
I agree with both what you guys are saying. There's been like the myth of the full stack developer. I don't think it's a myth anymore. I mean, there was always a subset of people that could do everything. But now to Jason's point, like we're not SQL experts. We're not DBAs, but we're able to now take our generalized understanding of software and architecture and supplement it with the tools now, we can take on the persona of a pretty good DBA, right? Not somebody that's been doing hardcore SQL for 20 years. Like, we're not as good as that guy, but we could get to mid to senior level pretty easily. Everybody should be able to do everything now.
When you work at those enterprise environments, there's a lot of people out there that are mid to low level skill, and they've just been hiding out. There were people you knew, like if there was a really thorny problem, you got to go get this person on that team or that person on that team. And those people were legend, right? Like they were the ones that would look at that and they would like listen to the electricity going through the wire and be like, we're not getting knacks. It's something to do with the spanning tree. Someone turned on spanning tree algorithm. And you're like, you're holding up a cable to the side of your head and you could tell spanning tree. Like what? You know what I mean? I mean, that's not real, but like that's pretty close.
But you're not far off, though. There's a signal. There's a signal and noise, being able to sift through the noise, or if there's no noise or no signal, be able to qualify this is what you do. But I think the scariness is still back to the non-deterministic nature of this, is even if we describe our problem into OpenAI, for example, and it gives us an answer, that still might not be the right answer because that's not what the model's been trained on or has good enough training data on.
Or you might not have the right prompt, right? Like,
right.
It's all about context, prompts, tools.
Take the same prompt and put them in back and forth. Because I do that. I'll go from one and validate the prompt. And it says, okay, or I say, what should I be asking that I'm not asking? Or what context should I be giving this? Oh, you should be putting not just an explain, but an explain and analyze. You should be doing this and this. Here's the context that you need. So I'll bounce back and forth and say, this is what I was given. What context am I missing to get a better answer?
My OpenClaw said, this is really hard. If you give me a Brave search API key, my results will get way better. And I was like, what? And it's like, yeah, you give me a Brave search API key. That's what I did. I just went and registered. I'm like $5 for 1,000 requests. And so I told her, like, you can only make 1,000 requests before you come tell me you need to do more. And like all of a sudden, all the results got a lot better. So I was like, what else could you use? And it's like, get me a Twitter API key. And I was like, all right, how do I do that? And it went out there and it like did the research. I never had a Twitter API key. And it's like, oh, they just changed that. Like, yeah, now it's like $20,000 a month. Never mind. I'm good. I'll hoof it. It's the search API key. But I was like, what else do you need? It's like, you can give me access to your email. It's like, yeah, we're not going to do that. Like, what else could you do? For all these people out there, there's a lot of value in this group that has kind of formed this immune system, this enterprise immune system to keep doing it the way they've always done it. And when you come in and say, well, the way you've always done it isn't great, they get defensive because you're not saying, and I trust you to do it better and I'll help you. And because a lot of those things, they kind of drift through it. They don't have staying power. Those like initiatives to do better. Or they bring in some high price consultant that's just full of it.
And too often those transformations are just pretty words on top of an efficiency plan, AKA a riff, right? It's not legitimately how do we make the people here more effective. Sometimes it is, and that's great. And it's hard to tell until you're in it, really. Usually if they're hiring certain firms to help, that usually is a clue. But we won't name those names today.
Dewey's Crewman Hal is here today to help you figure out what you can do for your career development.
Yeah, exactly. The other interesting thing, like you talked about it before, right? Like, you've got that immune system. You've got the natural resistance to change. Big enterprises tend to collect people that have that resistance to change, or they grow it in those organizations, right?
They chase off the ones that are willing to change, right? And that's something we were talking about earlier, is like the strategy for bringing in the right people to help with that change, like what it takes.
Again, use my time frame in the corporate world as the example. The organizational structures and a lot of the system designs and process designs are interesting because many of them are designed to explicitly remove the necessity for judgment. You think about a procurement process. Now, they wouldn't say that, of course. That's not how they would describe it. They're like trying to make sure that there aren't any conflicts or biases or whatever. The thing is, the outcome is the design, right? Is the intent.
Well, that's exactly right. There was no master plan. You're trying to fit a design over something that was a consequence of evolution.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so what ends up happening, though, is like over and over and over and over again, the solution out of these organizations, whether it's from an HR standpoint, a procurement finance standpoint, even technology decisions, is about a diffusion of responsibility and taking away and removing individual human judgment as much as possible, because that's deemed to be risky. It's legally risky. It's risky if you don't have the right people making those decisions. That's bad.
We're trained to look for consensus.
That's a problem. I mean, that's why smaller companies are more successful. That's why companies that still have the founder as the CEO blow away the other companies, because there's literally someone there that has the economic, the legal, the fiduciary, and like the spiritual power to say, we're going this way. I don't care what this consensus is. It feels like in a lot of ways, the AI stuff, it's not that it's going to break down all that entirely, but I think it's a real shot at it because it's going to have to require, in order to be successful going forward, is, to your point, you're going to need to be more high agency. You can't be this person that sits in my cube and I do this thing. You have to be someone who is leaning into the abstract. You're not a task doer. AI is really good at tasks. It's not good at jobs, at least yet. You're not a task doer. You have a job that is about a value creation of some kind, and your job is to see that happen.
I'm 100% with you on that. And that's where the trust factor comes in. Because if you feel like your leaders trust you to add value and give you agency to do it, they then won't turn around and give you a bunch of ridiculous things you have to do to make it work. And so sometimes you feel like if you truly trusted me, you would give me more autonomy and agency. And the fact that you not means you don't trust me, and then you're just looking for a chance to replace me.
Well, the organizations don't trust the individuals. This is kind of the point I'm making. Like, by design, the systems are built to not trust any individual, all the way up to the CEO, except for maybe the CEO they trust, whatever. But everything is
even the CEO has a way to. Oh, yes, board of directors, right? Yeah. They can remove the CEO just easily.
There's an accountability. What I mean though is, like, we all have some common people. We know a technology leader that has $1 billion budget annually, roughly, ups and downs, but approximately $1 billion budget. He can't just go buy something. She can't just go spend $1 million or whatever.
When I was at Ditech, I was talking to the CEO, Patty Cook, who went on to be the CEO of Finance America, and she brought me in to be the CTO there, and I owe her like more than I can ever account. She's talking about what is working and not working, and Ditech was formed out of a part of GMAC that was broken off, GMAC ResCap. Then they split it in half, and half of it went to Aqua, and half of it went to Green Tree, and it became Ditech. But I said, part of the problem is we've got people showing up in suits to work, and they're wearing a tie, and they think they're bankers. But in reality, all we did was mortgage origination. We didn't even do servicing. And we were closer to a strip mall stereo store than we were a bank. I hate to say that, and I feel bad. We were still highly regulated. But like, in reality, we're talking to people trying to sell them something that they need and they want. And that was our job. And so I said, culturally, if we keep acting like bankers, we're going to keep trying to make it hard to do things, because bankers have to make it hard to do things. I said, get rid of the dress code. So she went and said one day, no dress code. And it wasn't kind of Scott Neely, like the dress code is you must. She said, no dress code. And the head of HR went and formed a conglomerate against her. And they said, like, we've got to stop this. They went to her, and she's the CEO. And they're like, Patty, you can't do this. We stop you. And she's like, of course I can. And they're like, well, what if somebody comes to work in sweatpants? And she's like, and they do their job? I don't care. And they're like, well, what if it says juicy on the butt? And she's like, all right, the dress code is dress like a mature adult. That's it. And she's like, we have to trust our people to be able to make that decision. And honestly, if they can't, that's an isolated conversation with their leader. We can't dictate a policy that affects everybody because less than 1% of the people are going to do it wrong. And that, like, was the biggest company that was scale at. Now you 100% would be like, oh no, we absolutely will have a corporate-wide policy.
These people want individuals with agency. They say, hey, we want high agency, high leverage people. This is what we're looking for, but you've got to do it my way.
And fill out your TPS reports.
Check this box, check that box. You hired me because you wanted this. Do what you need to do to get the job done. But yet, here's the steps to do your job. Those things aren't the same. Or they make it painful to do it with not just the tasks you have to create, but you have to go and you pitch to this committee, go pitch to that committee. If you've deviated from the way things have been done, well, now you've got to justify why you've done it that way because it's not the way.
And you got to justify to a bunch of people that would have never done it that way. Not to go all Ayn Rand, but like, here we are.
But that's what's happening is that high leverage, high agency individuals, but do it this way. That's where there's a lot of headbutting, especially with the tools like this, where using artificial intelligence, it's going to find things that are a modern approach because that's just the data that it's trained on. It's not going to suggest at this point in time that you set up the on-prem data server with COBOL. It's not going to do that, but yet now you're saying to these new tools to do it an old way, there's going to be a struggle there. There's going to be some patterns that, oh, well, like, how do I train this on this old COBOL code? It could technically do it, but it's just, you're going to battle that.
Not only that, but like, think about the way that we use AI within the organization as a productivity tool for the team, right? We use Google Workspace, so everybody's got access to Gemini and all the Gemini stuff out of the box. We pay for Claude Code. We pay for Cursor. I don't think anybody's currently using GitHub Copilot, but it's available.
It was great for a while.
I was super obsessed with it until Cursor came, and then I was like, okay. It's still great for some stuff. I think I talked about this last episode. You can just drop something. The workflows are great. The integration with GitHub is awesome. For like just a little thing where I just want to throw it and I know it's something it can do. I just need to want to give it one sentence, let it go do it and give me a PR. And I do it from my phone. That's just amazing. But then Codex, GPT, all these different things. An enterprise would never do that. Like an enterprise would never let you have all 4 options. And I'm going to grab based upon my instincts or whatever's going on. I have all kinds of connection problems with Claude Code for whatever reason. I have weird internet. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe it's their fault. They're down all the time. It's not great at everything. It's good. It's great. It's probably the primary. Got to give OpenAI some credit. They know they're a good product organization. They know how to build stuff. And I still love Cursor. I'm still kind of bullish on the Cursor open code stuff because I think ultimately as the curve of improvement on the models flattens out, I think the models are going to become commoditized and it's all going to be the other stuff.
The harness becomes the thing.
Well, that's happening today, though. There's a new model that comes out. You have everybody switching to that because it's the best at the time. And then, now this is a new. Now they're trading first place all the time.
That's where the upskilling is so important.
My point is that when the progress slows, like right now, the model is driving the progress. But as the progress in the model slows, I think the harnesses that aren't tied to a foundational model family are going to be able to stay ahead of the ones that are. Right now, whether it's OpenAI's Codex or Claude Code or whatever, they're jumping ahead with their models. The harnesses are good. I'm not saying they're not, but they're leveraging the models in the best way. And so as the model gets improvement, they're jumping ahead. But again, as the model improvement flattens, I think that whether it's open code or Cursor or even Copilot, because Copilot still has a ridiculous distribution, I think those will catch up and be better and better and better because they'll be able to route between the different models.
Warp saved me recently. I got bat phoned in to this emergency performance problem thing. And I was helping out and I dumped in a modern observability tool set and learned a bunch of stuff about it. And then I finally went in and I warpified a session and just said, what's wrong with the server? And it looked at it and it came back and within 5 minutes it said, all right, somebody added this Nginx toolkit, the most recent version, and it's technically binary compatible with the old version of Nginx they had. But there's some sort of written in C segfault problem happening. Do you know how long it would have taken me to figure that out?
That is some esoteric stuff, man. Oh my goodness.
But then I was like, who did it? Not to do blame, but just to kind of understand what the story was. And so when I went to the exec and said, here's what happened. And they said, we were in really dire circumstances. The client was complaining about this performance. So we threw in a Redis cache on Nginx in front of the PHP just to do key value pair stuff. The symptoms of the performance got much better, but the stability dropped. As a CTO, if you'd said our strategy is going to be to deploy Redis so that we could put a caching tier in to support PHP, I would have said, absolutely, go try it in pre-production first, run it for a little bit and all that. Well, guess what? There wasn't enough traffic in pre-production for it to show up, right? So it's one of those things. But, I started thinking, what can Warp do? If Warp can do that, and then all of a sudden I'm sitting there I literally find my stuff where I'm I don't want to open up Claude Code, and I'm Warp, just go do it. The cost per credits in Warp are way higher because you can't put in your Anthropic IE. But every now and then, it just goes and fixes it for me. I'm thank you, buddy. It's a little buddy. Yeah.
I was testing out Codex quite a bit. I really like the way it approaches some problems. I equate them to Codex is that senior developer who processes problems, thinks about something, who's just going to be the quiet, stoic individual. It's just thinking, and then here's the solution. Whereas with Claude Code, I equate that to your senior engineer on a line of coke that is just throwing stuff out there just to try to get it to work. And they might come to the same problem the same amount of time. Claude Code might actually be faster in some cases, but the error rate might be a little bit higher in others.
Do you use an overlay? Do you use Super Claude or an overlay on top of it or anything?
Just raw. I use their Teamwork sessions and I've been piloting their teams. And so I'll create a team, but that's where it's optimizing for speed of parallelization. So it's your engineer on Coke that's working at a startup because it's just go. But then Codex is the thinker. It's the processor. And sometimes it can say, oh, no, this is crazy. I'll bounce the plans back and forth. And it'll say, no, this is a much simpler way of doing it. Just tell Claude Code to do it this way instead. It's much simpler.
Nobody's going to replace you with somebody who just watched a podcast. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but that's what people need to think about. You have to have sometimes access to both. What Duncan was saying is that you wouldn't have access in enterprise, but sometimes you need it because one is optimized for one specific task, or Codex is going to be more thoughtful on some things, but it can actually be slower, but come up with really good solutions and elegant solutions. Whereas if you're optimizing for just speed, Claude Code all the way because it is faster at trying to run things in parallel.
But a skilled practitioner, you can get optimal results out of either one as a skilled practitioner because you understand how to format the inputs to make it give you optimal output. And maybe you could be a little bit more proficient with one or the other, but that's where I do think if you're teaching people how to think and you're truly giving them the agency, like at the end of the day, the people that are good at virtualization with VMware are going to be good at virtualization with Nutanix, and they're going to crush it with Oxide. To some degree, what you're investing in is the people and getting the people to understand how to use the tools to the best, and then understand the tools are going to change. And that is even more important, like I think to triple click on that with the AI stuff. You cannot go to consultants to teach you how to use AI because guess what? The consultants barely have enough time to generate the next sales book, let alone playbook, let alone curriculum.
So let's take a step back. Putting together an upskilling playbook at this point is hard because we're still learning what's going on. This is maybe incorrect, but I think it's directionally correct. It's like there are no experts in this stuff right now because it's all brand new. Even the people building it are kind of like,
every day there's something coming in from a new...
The guys that build MCPs are saying like, some people still use MCPs. Like, I don't know. They haven't understood this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's like, it's just constant. There is no playbook. There is no static thing, but like, you can't really wait. Like, I mean, I guess you can, right? Like if you're at a bank, whatever, but
somebody else won't.
Yeah, you shouldn't be waiting, right? So the question is, so if you're a leader, you run a 20, 50, 100, 5,000 person team, whatever, what does your change management look like? I mean, forget which tool to choose and all that type of stuff. That's going to be circumstantial, but...
We already did that podcast.
Yeah. How do we help those guys and gals? Like, for example, we all know a common leader. That guy went so hardcore into the paint about AI post-GPT launch to the point where it cost him an enormous amount of political capital internally, right? Now, a couple of years have gone by, everybody's realizing he was totally right, that he got good ROI on that, right? But there was a time when it was just like silly. And to his credit, he just kept leaning in on it. He knew that people weren't interpreting it right. They were giving him lip service to some degree, like, oh, we have to do this AI thing, so so-and-so will be happy. But he at least changed the conversation in his organization. Now, it wasn't always healthy, it wasn't always productive, but at least it was about that thing. And he got the organization, at least the technology side of the organization, doing what they needed to do to start to think about these capabilities and how to start to leverage them. Now you're at a place where it's like, okay, now it's coming to fruition, but we still don't really know what it's going to look like. If he was to have us back to talk about stuff, because we have those conversations, like what would we tell him to do to help get his workforce ready to get on the wave?
It's bringing in people that have an intersection of two parts. One, they have the right mindset of being open-minded to figuring it out. Not that they know it, but they have an open mind to figuring it out. And they're really patient. And then letting them work on things that are purely focused on increasing quality. Because nobody can argue with increasing quality. Go back to the Phoenix Project and the 4 kinds of work. Like you have work for the business, for the customer. You have work that's break fix. You have work that's like to support you and give you more capabilities. And you have overhead, like PTO and all that. Like the only way to get more time to work on the primary things and to work on the stuff for yourself is to reduce the amount of break fix. So if you bring them in and say, we're just focusing on quality increases, we're going to use AI to help us increase our quality, nobody can argue with that. And it's not taking away anybody's job. And it's helping them have less of a defect rate. And nobody hates going and, to say like, yeah, it was all my fault. I missed that key sequence and forgot to turn on the spanning tree algorithm. Rob had to hold up the cable to his side of his head and listen for the packets to not act. You focus on something that's harmless, like quality. Harmless from what people are going to be afraid of, but like it gives them a chance to practice those skills and all that. What you really do is you start looking to see who rises and who latches onto those and starts looking for opportunity. And then you double down on those people. And if anybody just throws down their hat and says, I'm not going to do it, go put them on special projects.
This has always been a thing where you've had to have, but it's been very loose, is your NFRs. The NFRs, they're squishy. They're all over the place. They're not documented. That's where a lot of these organizations get wrong because they're optimizing for the wrong things. You have over-engineering on some things or significant under-engineering on the others. Where I found a lot better success with these tools is once you have them, give that context to the agent so that it knows this is not critical, things can break here, or this is P0 level critical and it cannot go down. And so that it can engineer things a little bit differently with its redundancies, fallbacks. These places don't have them documented very well today, if at all. Nobody knows what they're really optimizing for.
That's the first thing I do with AI. I would have AI go through the backlog of all the P3s and P4s. not the P0s and P1s, because those are like really, 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 really looked at. And whatever conclusion we're going to get out of those, we would or would not have gotten. But have a go look at all the P3s and P4s, because if you add them all up, they have cost the organization tens of thousands of hours and lost productivity. And mild, it's like having a autoimmune disease or having a constant flu. How much of your life would you lose if you just constantly had the flu? Those are what the P3s and P4s are. Sorry, right. I know I just totally like pounced on you there, but like dump the AI on that.
Right. I'd ask why. Like have what NFR was this missing that it should have been optimizing for, and start to put that into your content engine. So the question is they haven't adopted AI yet. They're starting to onboard it. Well, this is where you start building up that context today. This is where you have to start defining your non-documented NFRs today. What are our targets? What are our technology targets? Does everybody know this? Is this documented to an application or portfolio level detail? Is everybody aware of this? And can I drop an agent to point to this to say, here's our standards that we optimize for? So it's going to take you 6 months to build out, pulling that out of everybody so that when you are ready to do a full-on adoption, you have this gold mine of context to give it and point to. It says, here's our standards, go. Here's the app that you're working on. Here's the standards for it, go. So that it doesn't have to be repeated over and over.
And I think
that
keeps it from being an ivory tower too. Like one of the things I suspect is happening all over organizations, I don't have any empirical information, is you're making these like AI wizards in ivory towers, and they're going to be different than the architects that were in the ivory towers. And those like talk about anti-pattern, but the wizards in the towers are going to be like, should you bring me this problem, I can craft you the solution in 10 minutes, but like nobody knows how to bring them the right problem. And there's like only a couple wizards in the tower. What you need is the Jedis that are distributed. The Jedis are out walking, and maybe these are horrible metaphors, but the Jedis are out walking amongst the people doing good. You need to find people that can do that and embed them in teams as sorcerers.
So if I say this back to you guys, if I was talking to one of those suits or whatever to give them advice, what you say is you have to find your champions, your internal champions, or hire some, or both. Grow them or hire them.
Consultants.
Yeah. Hire
internal.
Either identify, grow, or hire new people that get it. Yeah. Right? Like you have to figure out what get it means and they get it. You do not let them just cluster together and create their little bubbles. You need to spread them through the organization, maybe cluster them informally, right?
Yeah, give them a center of excellence. Give them a community of practice.
I actually did give this advice, if I recall. I said, do not centralize your AI function. You could have a governance function that can be centralized, fine, but do not centralize. I lost that battle at one organization.
Or observability.
We don't need to open that can of worms. I think you do need to decentralize it and allow for, and this is, I think, less true than it was a couple of years ago, but it's like, hey, it's just another tool, whether you're going to go write some deterministic code, build your own PowerPoint, or build a process or a workflow or use an agent or whatever. Like it's another tool, a toolbox, and we should be always looking to use the most efficient tool. I think that that's maybe a little bit underselling it, but I think it's what you do. Like you do need people around. Like you learn from your peers. Now your peers may be a podcast, your peers may be Twitter, your peers may be YouTube, whatever. But within an organization, Jason's fond of saying you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? So within an organization, that dynamic takes hold. So you need a critical mass of those Jedis, as you call them, out in the streets to help kind of spread the good news, as it were, right? I mean, that's why we use the terms evangelists and relations type stuff, because you do need that to kind of spread and you need people's mindsets. And it's going to come much better from the side than from the top. You must use AI. Yeah, sure. Like that's the right idea, but that's not the right execution.
That's a lead measure, not a lag measure, right? Like you should not just dictate use AI. What you should say is be more effective at solving problems. AI is a tool you can use and will support you figuring it out. I was thinking for a long time, I've been using this analogy to say that like the rollout of AI was kind of like the rollout of the web, because I came into my career just as the web was starting to roll out. And I started thinking AI was like that, like it was that level of change. But I think it's actually a bigger step change. I think it's more like the rollout of electricity. And just the problem is like there's nobody alive today that remembers when they rolled out electricity.
Well, there was fear about electricity too. You can look back at political cartoons on electricity about, I remember one distinctly, is that there were wires hanging everywhere and people were getting zapped and shocked. And you're using scare tactics to say electricity is bad. You shouldn't use it.
I'm sure Big Candle and Big Oil kerosene were probably very against it, right? It was JP Morgan, right? Wasn't he like the biggest kerosene owner or kerosene provider? No, it wasn't Morgan. It was Rockefeller. Sorry, Rockefeller. That's how Rockefeller made all his money was on kerosene refining and shipping. or at least his initial.
I do think we're going to have Jevons paradox here, and
I do too.
I think everybody thinks that. Nobody thinks it's not going to be Jevons paradox, but I do think the way that it rolls out is kind of like I'm seeing in solar right now. Like solar right now, some of the last few years or so, they've had some innovations in solar that really make it way more effective. And Elon's talking about putting chips in space. He's talking about power, but most of what he's talking about is regulatory. It's easier to put chips in space than it is to put them on the ground for regulatory reasons. I think the real thing that is going to affect solar is the changes that are coming in battery, because you can't truly distribute solar until you can distribute battery. And some of the innovations in battery we're seeing are going to make it to where it's just going to be totally common for people to have little micro solar arrays on their house with true power independence. That, I think, is what we're going to have with AI when we truly get to local models.
The local models aren't bad. I play with Olama. It's not bad. They don't have the orchestration. The local stuff doesn't have the orchestration yet. You use Gemini, you use OpenAI, they do all this other stuff that's not just the model.
Yeah.
And so you have to build that up around it, and that takes some work and effort.
You've got to really set up a good local machine to be able to run the models. It's just, they depend too heavily on GPUs and not CPUs, and it's where they're just very, very slow.
Right. And sometimes you quantize that too much, it becomes useless, right? Like when I say invaluable, I don't mean invaluable, I mean useless. And to articulate this, I went to a Nutanix thing yesterday where they're talking about their AI in the data center kind of things. I don't actually mean AI in the data center. I think that is going to be a bit of a misstep, kind of like solar was, I think, for a long time before we get the battery worked out. I literally mean AI on the desktop. You're talking about a $15,000 workstation. Well, guess what? If I'm getting 2.5 times the productivity, I'll guarantee I'll give them a $15 workstation.
So yes, but also right now we're brute forcing everything. I am by no means an expert in the underlying model stuff, so I'm not even going to pretend. But we're using large language models, these giant parameter things, right? We're still in that sort of subsidized part of the curve. But when inference needs to be fast and needs to be cheap, it doesn't need to be those things yet. What'll end up happening is those models will get broken into 15 or 20 or 30 or 200 or 2,000 different smaller purpose-built models that can then run and you needs a fraction, 1/100th of the power, 1/100th of the time. And you just have something that routes and says, oh, let's use this model instead. This is good. You're asking a question about medicine. I'm going to ask this. OpenAI did this with their 5.2, right?
Claude is doing the same thing. So when I do a research task, it will automatically decide, instead of using Opus for the research task, it will then spawn a subagent using Sonnet or something else. And sometimes it'll even use Haiku. I just need to parse this out and use a different model for it. So it's doing the same thing. So they're already doing that optimization.
And that's where I think open code's going to win, right? I think open code will say,
that's what I'm saying.
These things go to Codex, these things go to Anthropic, right? I deeply want open code to work. I want FreeBSD to work. I deeply want FreeBSD to work. Get a tattoo of the devil on my shoulder, FreeBSD to work. But it hasn't enough yet. And I'm such a sellout that I'll just use the Claude code instead of making open code work for me. I deeply want open code to work.
My point was saying is the architectures, the tooling, I agree with you. I think the edge will happen more. And I don't know that you'll need a $15,000 station. The MacBooks may be enough, right? A nice MacBook, a $2,000 MacBook might be enough if it's specialized, right?
And that is an enterprise problem as well. When I worked at Finance America, I gave every developer, every tech worker, anything they asked for. They wanted 4K screens? Absolutely. What did a 4K screen cost me? $800? What did a fancy mouse cost me? $150? If I got 2% more efficiency out of a person that costs $150K a year, it's worth it. But enterprise, oh, no. You have to get a doctor's excuse before you get hired.
Because they don't trust you, man. Because everything's designed around not trusting you. Yes,
and then who do they attract? People you can't
and
trust.
It's fair. Here's the thing, right? This is maybe the thing you don't say in a public forum, but we've all worked at big enterprises, right? 20 to 30% of the work that goes on is zero value, right? You could say 20 to 30% of the jobs, but that's maybe overstating it, but certainly the work, there's no value.
You can certainly slice the horizontal and say 20% of the work is TPS reports.
Yes, exactly. It's busy work for busy work's sake. It provides no value. It goes right into the trash the second you finish it. I think AI is going to put enormous pressure on those roles and on that work, and because I can automate that work now.
I think it'll be a spotlight on the people that are zero value, because you'll start to go and say that all they did was the busy work. I feel a little bit bad because maybe they were the only ones that ungunk the printer queues every Monday morning. Without that, the printers don't work. But at some level, you're like, why are we still printing? At another level, you're like, well, what else could you do? Is there something else we need to do from an operator point of view? Do we need to operate? Do we need to clear out the caches for the AIs periodically? Do we need to go mass distribute all the AI models, the updated prompts, system prompts? I don't know.
not to throw shade at those people, but to say that I think that there's really a chance that AI will put pressure on this historical bureaucracy and the way that this diffusion of responsibility, like the diffusion of responsibility can now go into the agent, right? Like you can have agents that theoretically provide that check on your behavior, right? Or whatever. Like there's opportunities there to make things safer and less painful at the same time, I think.
I mean, I got to say, the one reason I'm tempted to have OpenCloud read my email by email basis, sometimes I'll like stop and say like, what do you think about this? To like just Claude Desktop or even OpenAI. I think OpenAI is pretty good at this, to say like, what does it say to you? Pretend like you're the recipient of this email. What does it say to you? And what it says is, you want to punch me in the face? Like, I'm going to rewrite that. And, eventually I want to get to like, we're failing to achieve mutual success. Like, okay, that's what I'm trying to say. Apologize for the earlier thing because it's what I was feeling, not what I was thinking.
Those things are great for that type of stuff too. Like anybody that isn't using them to just make themselves better at everything, they're just really missing out on an opportunity.
So just to pounce on that for a second, the same people that failed to embrace all the other things in technology that came, cloud computing, the virtualization, automation, observability. If you didn't embrace those things to make you the most successful version of yourself you could be, it's either because it was too hard to do, nobody would let you, or nobody inspired you, or you're a jerk. You know what I mean? We can't do anything about the jerks. So like the rest of them, let's at least try and inspire them.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. What else?
Truly being AI first, it's leading me to think about all aspects of it. We're doing a form of lending. And you think about like the traditional loan origination system, you had these such rigid workflows that were designed to be run by operators that were mildly skilled, but deeply understood the mortgage process. And I start looking at those now, like there's so much of that lifting that's going to be done by AI. And so I'm actually teaching the AI what matters most about this from an efficiency point of view and trying to figure out on clear to close and things like that. And like I start looking at this and think that there's like, I'm very thinking about very isolated this lending space. But there's going to be this massive wave of AI automation and integration that really is going to require us, I think, to rebuild so much stuff from the ground up, because I don't think you could add power. You see the castles in England that built in the 1400s, and there's like electric cords running around on the ground, and they put like a facade over them to hide the electric cords. I don't think you could do that with these loan origination systems and other classes of software. I think somebody's going to be vibe coding them. I think there's going to be 1,000 entrance into the market in the next couple of months. And it's like terrifying and exciting at the same time. Some class of software I'll never buy again. I'll just build them because I can build what we need and it's great. So I'm loving it, like all through the process.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. It's good to
appreciate it.
Good to see you again. And it's a good topic and we'll let everybody go and stick around for a minute. Thanks everybody. Appreciate you. And we'll talk to you again soon.